Hey, and welcome to Sean's live broadcast, and it's good to see you again. This is Sean with you live, all the way from Pennsylvania, USA, and great to be with you today. Listen, I just wanted to share a thought with you today, is that how do you keep going when everybody else is flailing? How do you keep focused? How do you keep moving forward when the world around you seems to be falling apart, when everybody has lost sort of touch, lost reality, lost direction, lost a sense of accomplishment, when they've got no direction, when they don't know what to do, and they just start falling apart, flailing around? The thing about it is that I really learned over the past couple of years, because, you know, back about 10, 12, maybe more years ago, 14 years ago, I had a major crisis in my leadership. Everything seemed to fall apart around me. And at that point in time, you know, is my sense of purpose. I knew what I was doing. I knew what I wanted to accomplish. I had set myself out to do that. I'd worked very hard to achieve it. And suddenly, this all falls apart around me. And everybody just scatters. And my thinking is, at this point, what do I do? You know, what do I do? I'm like a fish, a goldfish out of his fish bowl. Hey, Andre, good to see you. It's just like, what do I do? Everything is falling apart. Everybody is disappearing, and here I am. What is my life about? And at that point in time, I began to really research. It took me a while to get it, but I discovered that rather than practices, principles are the thing to live by. You know, we can easily become a sycophant. We can become this mindless machine that just operates according to the behavior that everybody says you must. You're just doing what you're supposed to be doing, and you keep moving forward, and you just keep functioning what everybody expects you to function, what everybody tells you to do, and you just become this sycophant. You just begin to become a machine. You just do things because that's what everybody does. But that's just where, when the structure is taken away, when the floor is moved, when the carpet is pulled out, and things suddenly change, what then? Who are you? What do you live by? What is your direction? What governs you at that point in time? What is your thinking? What is your paradigm? What is your mindset at that stage? Because that is going to depend on whether you keep going or not. And that's something, you know, I began as a parent, I began to think about this and teach my children is principles, not just behavior. Don't just act the way I expect you to act. Now, there is an element to that when they're young, when they're growing up, when they're immature, and you really want to teach them what is right behavior, teach them character. You've got to begin to set sort of some parameters in their life. But at a certain point, when they reach their teenager stage, you can't control their behavior anymore. And that's when you need to instill deeply the principles that they live by. Because when you're not around, and when they're in a situation where suddenly there's no government around them, there's no parameters, nothing setting boundaries, the principles teach them. And it's the same for in your career, or in your workplace, or in your job. You know, whether you, first off, if you're working in a job situation, you know, you need to think like an entrepreneur. You're going to be thinking the principles of entrepreneurship, even if you're working for a boss. Don't be thinking sycophant, I'll just do what they tell me and get by. You've got to be thinking beyond that. You've got to be exercising, practicing the principles of entrepreneurship, the principles of leadership, because that's what governs you and keeps you going when everything else falls apart. When the job, when the structure, when everything disappears, those principles keep you moving forward, keep you directed, so that when others are flailing, when others are falling apart, you keep going forward. If you're a manager, if you're an owner, a business owner, if you're a leader in any form or fashion, you need to really help people get the principles. It takes longer. You have to instill it. Is that you can tell people to have good customer service. You can train them, these are the 10 points of good customer service. But if they haven't got the principle, the heart, the principles of customer service, when you leave, customer service goes out the door. And so you need to instill the principles. Same in your family, same in your life. You need the principles to govern you. If I look at the Bible, Jesus taught principles to govern people. Not to govern people. Yes, to govern people, because he preached the kingdom. And so he gave principles. He taught principles that that would govern their behavior, not just behavior. He didn't just say, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this. He taught the principles behind the behavior so that they could live when he was there, or whether he wasn't there, they would have the principles. As a parent, as working for somebody, as a boss, or rather as a business owner, business leader, manager, instill principles. Rather work with the principles. It takes longer. It means a little bit more deeper thought. It means you have to really get that instilled, imparted, rather than information, but it will outlast behavior. Just teaching the do's and the don'ts of things. Teach the principles. Get the principles imparted, instilled, and thinking in that way. Principles is what keeps you going when everybody else falls apart. So that's what I want to share with you today. Think on the principles. Coming out of the crisis that I had 14 years ago, it took me a while, really took me a while, but as I sat and I began to review the principles that I needed to learn, the principles that governed what took place, how it took place, why it took place, and why it happened to me, and what was the principles that I needed to come out of that. It took me a while, but when I got it, it's okay, now I know. It doesn't matter what people do around me. It doesn't matter what happens to the structures around me. In fact, the structures sometimes can be the limitation for where I am going and where you are going. And so, that's what leaders do. Leaders find the principles and they begin to move forward, and they keep going. They keep going because there's something directing them. There's something that governs from the inside rather than the structure on the outside. So when everything's falling apart, you are governed by those principles. You're directed by principles, not just behavior. Because behavior, what happens if my behavior becomes unacceptable suddenly? What happens if, somebody's imposing some kind of behavior on me? What happens if the influence around me is wrong? What then? What do I do then? Then it's principles that govern you. Principles begin to speak clearly. So think on these things. This is my thought for you today. This is Sean.